Welcome to FTB Fridays for Friday, the 21st of May, 2021. I am your host, Jason C. McLean, and we are joined by Der Kosmonaut, who is a writer, blogger, artist, and expat American currently living in Serbia. Welcome back.
Hello, Jason. Good to be back.
Good to have you back. And of course, if you're on here, it's probably because we're talking about American politics. That's usually our go-to for that. So we'll start with the general topic. I propose this question to you. Is Joe Biden the next FDR?
Of course not.
Of course not.
Of course not. Listen, you know how many times I've heard the same tune? Let's go back 1992, 1993. We heard the same thing about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was going to be the next FDR. Why? Yeah. Well, he had promised national health care. He actually appointed Hillary Clinton to head a task force to implement national health care.
Yeah.
What happened? We know what happened with that.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward, 2008, 2009. Barack Obama, new president. He was thought to be the new FDR. Remember those 10 million shovel-ready jobs, those new 10 million green jobs?
Yeah.
High speed rail. What happened with that?
Yeah.
And now again, with Biden, we hear the same. Refrain. He's the next FDR.
Yeah. Well,
so no, every Democrat, new Democratic administration since 1993 has been hailed as the next or new FDR, and people should not buy it.
Yeah. Well, why I was a little bit hopeful this time is the fact that Biden didn't promise any of that stuff. Biden seemed like the ideal centrist Democrat, boring. And the thing is, when FDR came in, he was originally pretty boring too. And then he got into power and he was pushed into doing the New Deal. Do you think that maybe, Biden could be pushed into doing some good things?
Well, no, people forget that FDR had a history before he was president. He was governor of New York State before. And already New York State, and he became governor of New York State in 1926. Now his predecessor was Al Smith. Now Al Smith was the one who actually started kind of the New Deal in New York State. He's the one that really started massive public work projects, particularly we're using Robert Moses to create the state park system, which was up until that time the largest appropriation of private property and private land for state parks and state bridge and state beaches. So FDR had already come in as governor of New York State with a kind of very much a big public works program. And in fact, when he became governor of New York, he actually expanded many of the state parks. He had built highways, and actually he did a lot of infrastructure. So he already came from that political background of where in New York State politics, the New Deal actually started in New York State.
In New York State, yeah.
In New York State. So people forget that, people forget that he had a pretty long political history. So he just wasn't a political novice who just suddenly became president of the United States and had these brilliant ideas. Another thing you have to remember was that FDR, people give too much credit to one politician, or on the other hand, all the blame. And it wasn't just FDR. He had a cabinet, and what people have to remember that the New Deal was really the project of two members of his cabinet, Harold Ickes, who was the Interior Secretary, who actually created most of the New Deal, and Frances Perkins, who no one really gives much credit to. She was the first first women cabinet secretary ever in the United States, and she was the Secretary of Labor. And so FDR actually assembled a cabinet that was very, very interested and willing to implement some social reforms and some public infrastructure.
Was Wallace part of it then, or was he later? George Wallace.
He was part of it as well. He was very successful as vice president, and was also able to really also connect to the masses. So that's the big difference with FDR from
Yeah.
Biden. I
But
mean, they come from completely different political backgrounds and also a very different time. I mean, you have to remember that
yeah.
um, you know United States was really on the verge of a massive socialist communist revolution. You had a very militant working class movement. I mean, you had the unions that were led by anarchists and socialists and communists, and there was a real threat of revolution in the United States. So that also pushed Franklin Roosevelt.
Yeah.
So different time, different politicians. So I think
Yeah.
people need to understand that context between FDR and Joe Biden. I just
But
wanted to add that in.
yeah, as far as what Biden is doing, though, is any of what he's done so far surprised you to the point of you think it might actually be better than what you thought people were going to get when he was elected?
Well, he did some for two things he's done. First of all, I was very surprised and impressed that his Justice Department seems to be going after the Trump administration, in
Yeah.
particular Trump's personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani. Just a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York actually conducted an early morning raid, both on Rudy Giuliani's home and his office, and seized his computers. Um, Apparently they have been the U.S. Attorney's Office has been wanting to go after Giuliani for a long time, but the the Trump Justice Department blocked it. So this looks like there's going to be an indictment coming pretty soon against Giuliani. That's
Yeah.
really surprising. I didn't expect him to go, at least this administration, to go after that.
Yeah.
Another thing that really surprised me was actually how he handled this latest crisis in Gaza.
Really? Hmm.
That really surprised me. I mean, I just before we went online, I just read the NBC report, which seems to be the most in depth, and he basically very quietly, but he put a lot of pressure on Israel to pretty much bring the ceasefire.
Really? That's
Usually, every president always kind of unconditionally supports Israel.
even
Always blames
Obama.
the
I mean, Obama.
Palestinians, yeah, that. And so I was really surprised, really surprised. I did not expect that he would handle this quite well. I mean, of course, we know ceasefire is going to last a few days, a few months,
Yeah.
maybe a few years. But unlike Obama, who let this go on for 51 days and over 2,000 Palestinians dead, this was basically 11 days and 200 Palestinians. Still too long, but he nipped this in the bud, and I
Yeah.
was really quite surprised
Yeah. Do you
how he
think
handled it.
Congress might have, because the fact is the tone in Congress is a bit different. You have people like AOC, people actually outright speaking out against what Israel's doing, which is something that you rarely heard from like that number of people. And she even passed a resolution, or a few people passed a resolution to not sell arms to Israel. And then Bernie Sanders backed that up in the Senate. Do you think that what's going on in Congress could be affecting him at all, or do you think this
Oh
is
yeah,
just
definitely. Yeah, that's definitely it. I mean, the Democrats are feeling pressure from members in both houses of Congress, but particularly the House of Representatives. So yeah, he's definitely, and also, there was, I think Pelosi is also a bit nervous. So Pelosi doesn't
yeah.
also, I think they don't, for whatever agenda they need, both Biden and Pelosi need to pass, they can't afford to antagonize the so-called squad too much. So
Yeah.
I think there's definitely something there. You have a point. There's something
Yeah.
definitely
Also,
to
Chuck
that.
Schumer. There's a rumor that he's going to be up for re-election next cycle, and there's a rumor that AOC might primary him unless he starts doing some good things.
Well, I haven't heard that, but that would be good. I mean, he should be primary. He's not really. I mean, he's just not. I mean, he's just a Wall Street puppet. Always has been.
Yeah.
So it would be really good if she does primary him and she actually defeats him.
Yeah.
That will really be good. So maybe there is a possibility that this year, moving into the midterms next year, that there could be some pressure from AOC and others to at least give some to force the Democratic leadership to make some concessions that ordinarily they wouldn't make. And I think
Yeah.
also many people got burnt by Obama, and I think that now people are not as willing to give Biden and Pelosi and Schumer a pass as they did before.
Yeah. Also, Biden might, I mean, just by his age, people are saying Biden's probably going to be like, even if he, like, he's incredibly popular, he's probably only going to do the one term. I mean, do you see him running again for a second term, or do you think he's trying to set up Harris or someone else to take over?
It's hard to say. Reason why I don't quite believe that he's trying to set up Kamala Harris, is that she is very unpopular.
Oh,
She didn't win one single delegate in the primaries last year. She's really, really not so popular. But of course, things can change. She could actually show, she could change. She could show some leadership, some maturity. But she's not so popular a politician, and I'm not really sure if she really has the political wherewithal to really, really be able to campaign effectively in
yeah.
2024, especially if it depends on who the Republicans put up. But I'm skeptical about that. You're right. Biden's getting old, so I think he might want to run, but we don't know. He might not be able to
He's
run.
got the perfect, he's
Might
got the
even die. So
he's got the perfect excuse if he doesn't want to. He's old. But like that, one thing. Okay, I'm thinking of some of the things that people are saying Biden might do. Is first of all, is stopping the filibuster, because uh, I mean, I know he wanted to cut deals with Republicans, but he's dealing with people like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who are basically Republicans who pretend who run as Democrats. Like, do you think he'll really be able to clamp down on those people? Because that's pretty much the obstacle to everything he wants to do, right? Or everything.
no, well, actually, no, I don't think he. I mean, he just he's actually not. He's very cool on the idea of eliminating the filibuster, and that comes from his 40 years in the Senate.
Yeah,
And so, as a senator, um, with all his experience in the Senate, I don't think he's very, very keen to change the Senate rules. So I'm not sure about that. Also, the thing is that I think that I still I still know that Biden is a right winger, and he needs people like Joe Manchin in order to actually make an excuse as to why he can't implement his promises of reforms. Look what happened with $15 an hour, $2,000 checks.
yeah,
So
yeah.
he needs. I mean, he needs these right wing Democrats in order to deflect the blame and say, "Well, see, I tried, but I can't do it. My hands are tied." Which funny by the way. Speaking about that's one comparison to FDR.
Yeah.
FDR often did that, particularly when he was dealing with black civil rights activists in the 30s.
Oh,
Um,
he,
A. Philip Randolph, who were actually demanding, of course, civil rights, and FDR would use the excuse of the Southern Democrats, the Dixiecrats, to say, "Oh, my hands are tied." So
yeah.
I mean, if there's one apt comparison to FDR with Biden, I think that's it.
It's not how
Biden,
you want it. Not how you want to be compared to FDR. There's
yeah,
plenty of good things you can be compared to, but there's a few bad ones, and like, but
yeah, I
yeah,
know. Here's the thing. Biden after the 4 years of Trump, how the Republicans were accessories to this insurrection, which we discussed before.
yeah,
Um, Biden is really keen on propping up the Republican Party. He insists that The
Yeah.
country needs a strong Republican Party.
Even though they're keen on destroying him, they've even said they want. McConnell says his goal is to block everything Biden does. Like,
yeah, and that's it, and that works. That's the game that the Democrats have been playing since Clinton.
Yeah.
It's always to blame the Republican Party or to blame right wing Democrats as to the reason why they can't implement what they promised to implement. I've been through this so often, so I see right through this.
What about stuff like the Supreme Court and DC statehood? Do you think he might? Those aren't necessarily like. I mean, do you think he might actually add more people on the Supreme Court, or actually help the push for DC statehood? I know he said he did in the election, but do you think that might actually be something he tries?
Well, actually, funny enough, here we go. Another comparison. This one a little bit more positive to FDR. FDR also wanted to stack the Supreme Court, but that he wasn't able to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that he probably wants to do. I think that he is worried about this hard right majority on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
He also, just from a practical level, he understands that even if he's able to get some of his agenda passed, he's worried that possibly the hard right Supreme Court will overturn this legislation. So I think that's very well that he will want to try to expand the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Of course, if he can actually do that, that remains to be seen. But I don't think he's going to touch the filibuster. DC statehood, of course. That gives the Democrats automatically guaranteed 2 extra seats. So yeah, of course, he's going to try to push for DC statehood. So yeah.
And do you think he might achieve that one? Because I mean, people have talked about that before, but he seems to be, compared to even to Obama, he seems really interested in that one. And obviously for political reasons, but do you think he might succeed in the next few years?
Well, this is the thing. He has a very limited time window. Historically, the ruling party faces defeat in the midterm elections. This is why it's very, very important that he's got to implement some very popular reforms this year.
Yeah.
And if he does not, then his whole legislative agenda is pretty much sunk. So he's got to push in DC statehood this year. But what he has to do if I was to give Biden advice, he has to more stimulus, $2,000 a month recurring stimulus checks for the duration of the pandemic. If he does that, then if he and the Democrats do that, they have a good chance of retaining both houses of Congress and even extending that. But if they make excuses as they normally do, then they're going to lose control of both houses of the Congress, and then nothing will get done.
Yeah, and then because I mean the threat ultimately is in 4 years when Donald Trump decides to come back, right? Like, because he's going to run again if he's not in jail.
We have to be careful because that's a long time.
Yeah,
it's a long time. We have no idea what's going to happen. We don't even know what's going to happen by the end of this year.
Yeah, true.
I remember there was the talk when back in 2000. And right after Gore lost the election, and people were saying that Hillary Clinton's going to run in 2004, and she's definitely probably going to beat Bush, but that didn't happen. So we don't. So yeah, we don't. I want to be careful about speculating about 3-4 years from now, because the world compared to 2 years ago, as you tell me, when in the end of 2019, what will happen in 2020 and now. No, so we have to be careful. But I think we have to focus right now on this year and 2022, and that's still that ball still in the court of Biden and the Democrats, and they have to learn how to play hardball.
And well, I guess in terms of speculation, I will speculate on this weekend. I hope we both have a good weekend. But I do want to thank you very much. How can people follow you? It's on blog. What's your blog?
Yes, so it's Adventures of the Cosmonaut. That's where it is. You can just enter that into a search engine, and that's there cosmonaut.blogspot.com.
And we'll put a link in the description of the video. And you can follow Forget the Box. You follow from me, Jason C. McLean, on Twitter at Jason C. McLean. Follow Forget the Box at Forget the Box on Twitter. Give us a like, share, and follow us on Facebook. Like, share, subscribe on YouTube. There's an Android app. And of course, for a daily content, check out forgetthebox.net. And we'll catch you next week for another FTB Fridays.